introducing basically what a note is. Why are they discounted? And we're going to talk some about what are the risk in owning a note, but we're also going to talk to you a little bit about, and Eddie's going to explain, what are the different factors that you want to look for when you're buying a note.
Yep. All right, well, let's get started. Module 1. Most common question I bet Martha and I have been asked our whole year or so doing this is, what is a note? And a note can be as simple as a check. Like literally, a check is a note. If you see the example here, it's payable to John Doe for $1,000. And a note could also be an installment note. It could be a car payment or a mortgage loan. And so both of those are a note. Technically, a dollar bill's a note, right?
That's right.
So you know, because sometimes we kind of convince ourselves it's a little bit complicated, and it really isn't. So, okay, let's talk about the type of notes that we're going to look here. And this would be where the seller sells a property and they convey ownership to the buyer via a deed. And a deed is simply just a bill of sale of real estate, so to speak. And then the buyer doesn't have all cash, and so the buyer then signs a mortgage note, right? And a mortgage note, of course, is payable over time with interest, and we'll get into some of those specifics in a minute. And so then who holds the note? And so who holds the note is the lender. The buyer is the borrower. It's the payer on the note, but the recipient of the note, the one who gets the money, is the lender. And of course, we think of that being traditionally a bank, but it doesn't have to be a bank, right? It also could be, and they have a lien against the property if you see those chains go up around the house, but it also could be the seller of the property. It could be seller financing. So the seller of the property also becomes the bank. Either one of those, a lot of partials are related to seller financing. That's not absolutely essential that it is, but most of the seller finance transactions Martha and I have done, you know, probably 90% of them have been on seller financing.
Right, and as you can see, it's really just a typical, like, for example, residential home purchase, which most of our audience is going to be familiar with. They purchased a home, they've gone to the title company, they've signed all these documents, so they signed the note, they signed the deed of trust. And so they, you know, so it's basically that type of transaction is exactly how it starts, whether the bank is financing or an individual is financing.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be a house, right? I bought 5,000 notes from two guys in Fort Worth, Texas. 5,000 notes where they sold land. And every one of those notes, they sold me a partial, like literally every one of them. So that definitely is, you know, the collateral type is not tied necessarily just to a house, but it works great on a house. And so anyway, let's look now at the relationship. You have a note, and in this scenario, the note is the seller financed property, and that's the house. And so there's two ways you can end up with a note. You can end up with a note by seller financing it, a property that you sold, or you can end up with a note by buying a note. So Martha and I have been in the note buying business, and most of the notes we've created have been, the majority of the notes we've created have been notes that we've bought. But Martha and I have both been active real estate investors and certainly owner financed a lot of property, many hundreds, where we seller financed it and end up with a note and sold a partial. So either one of them will work, and depending on what your situation is, I think it'll become clear to you guys as to how you can progress with that. All right, so it can be a note. Martha, let's talk about that. What is a note? Well, there's terms, right?
That's right. Well, the initial thing is just, you know, how much are you actually, you know, going to sign the note for? How much money is being paid down? So then then from there, what are the terms of the note? Right.
So the principal amount is the amount of the debt, and then on top of that is interest. We generally think of a mortgage note being payable monthly. It doesn't have to be payable monthly.
No, we see it. We see all kinds of terms.
And then the amortization term is how long it takes the loan to pay back. And so then when the buyer signs the note, puts his John Henry on the note, then now you got a note. And we'll talk about the mechanics of that a little bit. But you've heard it called a seller finance note. You've heard it called paper. You've heard it called a home loan. You heard it called a mortgage. It's all essentially the same thing, right? All right, so let's talk about the mortgage lender with a note. And once again, could it be a seller financer? Yes, it could be the bank or it could be a seller financer. And then you have a note investor. And the lender who holds the note sells that loan at a discount.
Right. That's where the discount comes in when the person that actually did the financing wants to sell the loan.
Yeah. People say, who in the world would discount a note? And Martha and I kind of laugh and say, well, a lot of people would discount a note because we bought 40,000 discounted notes. So exactly. It's a market condition. It's the same question that you would have with why would somebody sell their house at a discount, right? Because they have a use for the money or they've got to solve a problem or got to send a kid to college or maybe they've got some financial issues or whatever it may be. Right. But the market
they're
condition.
Really looking for a lump sum of money up front instead of the monthly payment that's coming in every month.
Yeah.
So
there's ways to do this and not take a discount, right? You can do a partial and basically recognize the full amount of the note and still retain residual income. So this isn't an absolute, but when we're in the note buying business, we generally are buying seller finance notes at less than the full amount. So, Martha, what's the most common method of the discount note industry that everybody recognizes? A check cashing service.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a good example so that you can understand the discount and how it works on a note.
Take your $1,000 check to a check cashing service. They don't give you $1,000.
They don't. They're going to charge you a service fee.
But technically, they're not charging the service fee because they're just simply buying the note at a discount.
That's right. So,
right? They're buying your $1,000 check for $850.
Right.
They could buy it for $50, but they're still entitled to collect a full $1,000 when they run it through their bank. So when we buy a note at a discount, we are buying the right to legally collect the full amount that is owed plus interest. That's pretty good, huh? So that's what we've been doing for our life, and we learned this strategy, as you heard me say. Initially, Martha's father taught me the business, and they figured out partials originally because they limited the investment firm that was buying notes from them was limited in how long of a term note they could buy. But we'll learn a lot of different reasons that partials can work and what that can look like along the way. So there's your check cashing service, right?
Right.
And Eddie gives a check to John Doe. John Doe takes it to the check cashing service. The check cashing service gives him cash, but they don't give him the full amount of the check. They give him $850. And technically, the check cashing service, John Doe in this case, sold his note at a discount. It's a nice way to do it. Why do people like notes so much? They like notes because they like mailbox money. And that mailbox money over time, see it get bigger? That mailbox money over time, that's why people like it. People say, why would I rather own a long-term note than have a hard money loan? Well, in 5 months, a hard money loan pays off if it was a good one.
Yeah.
And then they got to go find another deal.
Yeah, they got to go reinvest that money again.
This is one time work one time equals long-term income.
Right, invest that money one time, but collect over the next 20 or 30 years.
That's it. Now, this partial strategy lets us sell a stream of payments and then keep residual income. So that work one time can still give you upfront money for that work, but then it can produce long-term income. So that's why we like long-term installment notes, and they work really well with partials. So let's look at just a generic loan here for a moment. $100,000 at 9%, $1,000 a month is the payment, and that happens to amortize over 186 months. That's 15 years and 6 months. Now, hypothetically, and we'll have a lot of specific examples, but we're going to buy that note, Martha, at a $70,000 price. So we're going to buy it at a 30% discount, haircut, you know?
Right.
And that's the price of the note. And so let's work with that. So you'll see the remaining loan balance is $100,000, and we'll assume there had been essentially no payments made. We're going to buy that whole stream of payments for for 15 years on that note. We're going to buy that whole stream of payments for $70,000. And when we do that, what it really does by buying the note at a discount, it makes the return on our investment higher than the interest rate on the note. So the $70,000 price means that essentially the interest on our investment is more than 9%, right? The interest on our investment is over 15% because you're going to earn the interest on the note plus that $30,000 discount over time.
Correct.
All right? So we'll have a lot of examples of discounted notes. And so Martha and I like to look at a note just as a stream of payments, right? Just a stream of payments over time. And that's the investment in the note is $70,000, but we're going to get, Martha, $1,000 a month for 186 months.
That's right.
$186,000 over time, right?
That's correct. For my $70,000 investment.
For your $70,000 investment, that $186,000 is as if you could go to the bank and earn 15.6% interest on a CD for the next 15 years.
Right. And I don't think you can do that today.
That's why people like notes.
We like notes.
That's why they like notes.
Exactly.
So this would be the acquisition side. This is how you buy the note, and you buy the note at a discount.
Right.
And we'll have, as I said, we'll have plenty of real examples and case studies, but this was just a generic example to kind of get your mind thinking. And let's talk about risk, right? You have what you pay for the note and the cost of the note compared to the value of the property, and we use that as called the investment to value ratio, right? The
That's
investment to value ratio, because we're buying a note at a discount. Martha, if the note were $100,000, the property was worth $120,000, right? In our analogy we're using,
right?
But we only paid $70,000 for the note. We have $70,000 invested, secured by $120,000 property.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So yeah, so that also, and speaking of risk, covers a lot of your risk factor there if something were to happen and there were to be some type of default.
Well, one of the things that a partial we'll talk about, a partial lets us do, is not buy all of the payments, right? Which means that we can lower our investment compared to the value of the property.
That's right.
So we can re-underwrite a deal, so to speak.
Right. So if the investment to value were too high and we were buying the note, then we would back off of that and say, well, that's too high for us, so we'll buy a partial on the note. So it's the same thing as selling a partial. We can also buy a partial.
Right. You heard me talking about I had a customer that sold land, right? They sold land, and they would finance about 90% of the land when they sold it. So if they sold a piece of land for $100,000, they would finance about $90,000. But our criteria was on that land, we didn't want to be in much more than about 50% of what the land was worth.
Investment to value, yeah.
On land, right? So guess how we fixed it?
Buying
we bought a partial. We shortened the payments that we bought, and when we did that, we lessened our investment.
Right. And then your risk is less because you don't have as much invested in that particular type of asset.
Yep. So it's pretty fun of what you can do. So Martha, you basically all you do is buy partials every day.
Well, I actually acquire the full loan, like Eddie was just showing you. We actually do acquire the loan, and then we turn around and we sell the front end payments, or what we call the partial. So we sell a portion of the cash flow. So and then our partial buyer will collect his payments, and then the loan will revert back to me.
All right, so you make decisions every day trying to determine if the loan that you buy is a good loan.
I do. I do my best, but things happen.
You're pretty savvy. You're pretty savvy.
Happen.
All right, so I really think there's probably three things just from a very big picture that you look at. The buyer, the loan, which is how they're going to pay you back. So the first question is always, will I get paid?
Exactly. Are you going to get paid? That's correct.
And then secondly, how much are you going to get paid? And then thirdly is the collateral, and the collateral can be two things, right? The industry calls collateral not just the property, but also the paperwork securing the property. Both of those are called collateral, and meaning that obviously if they don't pay, you're going to take back the house.
Right. In other words, how, if something does happen and they don't pay, like what does the paperwork say? Like how does that work exactly?
Right. Now this partial strategy is not for non-performing notes. Right.
It is not. You really want a nice performing note, somebody that's paid for over a period of time, that you can see a very consistent payment history. That's the type of note that you're looking for if you're going to go out and sell the front end of the loan and sell it to a very passive investor. Because a passive investor is going to want that security that he's going to have that payment coming in every month.
Most of the loans that you buy are seasoned.
Most of them are. If they are not, then I hold them and I actually just keep the note myself until I'm down the road enough and I have a comfort level that the borrower is paying very consistently, and I don't really have to be concerned about that there could be a glitch in the payment history. Right.
So what is seasoning?
It's just the number of months that someone's paid.
Okay.
So some of them I bought notes there are. Maybe they only have 2 or 3 or 4 payments made. I'm not going to go sell that type of note to a passive investor. But if they have, 3 to 5 years or more, we buy notes that have sometimes they've paid 10 years.
Yeah.
It's all over the place. So those loans are even if some people have not paid perfectly. If they've been there a long time, they've paid on that property a long time, they have equity in the property, and they have what we call emotional equity, because they're very tied to the home emotionally and to the community. And, like their kids are in school there, their jobs are there. So they have, they want to stay there. And that's really important too.
And people do bring you loans that have 20% down and 800 credit. So
yeah,
you pretty much know that loan's going to pay, right?
And that's a good example on a loan that has, 2 or 3 payments made. They probably put a significant amount of money down. Yeah, they've made a large down payment. So that's what we call a redeeming factor. And buying that loan is that they made a good down payment and have a better credit score. And so we're willing to take the risk on the fact that they don't have a very long payment history.
Martha, I always say that really evaluating the type of notes we buy, it's just redeeming factors. Right. We don't necessarily see a perfect note. There's always some imperfection.
Exactly.
But you just weigh the good and the bad, and you're just scaling out the good and the bad of the deal.
Exactly.
A guy could have a little injured credit,
right,
but you've got a 3-year pay history. Mm-hmm. Or maybe they couldn't get a loan at the bank, but they have excellent credit but they're self-employed. Maybe they couldn't.
Right, exactly. That could be. Mm-hmm.
There's a something, right, that
there
makes it, that gives it like I can live with that loan.
Yeah.
Yeah. And obviously you see loans that you don't buy. You see loans that in due diligence you just say, hey, I can't get the fuzzy with it.
Yeah, there's going to be some that we have to pass on for some reason. It would be wonderful. Honestly, if I had the cash just sitting in my account that I could buy every loan that one-off loan that we see, I'd buy every one of them. But that's just not what I just don't have the actual cash to do that. If I did, I would. So anyway, yeah.
Well, but you see loans that the loan doesn't have enough good characteristics, and you had to pass on those too.
Right, exactly. There are loans that we do pass on because of that. But you know what? I just, for what I do, I still do want the really, really good performing loans. But on some of the other ones that, there are some glitches on. Personally, Eddie and I have bought some of those. We've gotten more discount on when we made the acquisition, but we at one time had a huge portfolio of loans that they were the riskier loans, and you know what? It was good income.
We priced the risk.
Yeah.
All right, so let's kind of wrap up, Martha, where we were in this first module, and just talk a little bit about as we progress into it, like we've kind of set the framework. We're buying a loan at a discount.
That's right.
Right? Or this would work equally though if I'm seller financing my own property, right?
Exactly, because I had a fix and flip model for 5 years. That's all I did was buy real estate. And on some of those, I did owner finance them, and then I actually sold a partial on the loan to recoup my investment.
Good. So this will work on property that you're selling as well as buying notes from somebody else. And the next module, Martha, we're going to get off into the mechanics of a partial. We're going to actually look at some partial transactions so that they can get a sense of, you'll hear me use the phrase carving up a cash flow.
Okay.
And so we're going to get to the mechanics of that in the next module, and it'll be fun. We're diving off in it.
Okay.
Okay, see you then.